Hello, I'm Keith Kreisher, the Executive Director of the IoT M2M Council. We're here on the floor of the Consumer Electronics Show, CES 2025. And it's IoT week here at CES. The IMC will be putting on, my organization will be putting on conference panels. We've organized the IoT Infrastructure Pavilion here with the show, and we'll be doing network events and on-the-floor interviews. And with that, I'd like to greet my good friend and colleague, Benson Chan, principal at the Strategy of Things Group, and the former head of the NIST IoT Advisory Board. Benson, welcome.
Keith, thank you. Great to be here. Good to see you again.
You guys are working on a big report, and it's been taking you some time to get that together, talking about where development is needed in the IoT sector, specifically as it relates to government. Talk to us a little bit about that. I know it's been a big effort. Summarize the report, if you could, for us in just a few words.
Sure. So this report is funded through a grant, a collaborative agreement with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The federal government is interested in understanding where are the gaps, technology infrastructure gaps. What are the things that industry isn't doing that the federal government should invest resources and investments in? And what are some of the things that they should be doing? Right? So that's the gist of the study. So for this study, we looked across 9 industries, in this case, agriculture, manufacturing, construction, insurance, cities, retail, transportation, logistics, renewable energy. And the idea was to look at those industries that are significant to the US economy. Right? And federal government believes that IoT can be a real benefit, bring some substantial economic opportunities. And they want to see, are there any technology barriers holding the industries back from adopting IoT or using IoT?
Right. But what is the ultimate objective of the report? I mean, is it to recommend to government policymakers where the government should be focusing its efforts?
Yes. So the federal government is interested in, number one, where are these gaps? What are the, you can say return, what are the return on investments of addressing those gaps at a national economic level, right? So a broader level. And that's really what we're trying to get the arms around. Are there gaps that we really need to go and address? Right? The things that industry doesn't want to do, and what's the return on our research investments if we were to address those gaps? Right? So so that's what they want to have. They want to use that to inform government researchers, government policymakers into prioritizing and identifying those opportunities for investment.
Great. So talk to us about some of the major findings. What came out of it?
So this is very interesting. First of all, IoT itself is not static. It continues to evolve, right? And we identify 4 phases of this involvement over the next, from today over to the next 30, 40 years. Right? So things get smart. This is stage 1. This is where we are today. Stage 2 is all the AI, the intelligence in all this data that's been collected. Now some of these devices start to act on it, act autonomously on it. Right? So that's stage 2. We're entering that stage. Third stage is IoT as a utility, IoT as a service. Right? Instead of buying a product, you're buying a service based on that product. And then the fourth is the future state where you have billions of interconnected devices talking to each other, communicating, sharing, working together. So that's one finding. The second finding that we found was, well, there's not just 3 to 5 gaps, but these gaps there are 11 gaps that we found from our research, and these gaps are organized into 3 categories. Core gaps, right, which are core to the functionality of IoT, connectivity, interoperability, privacy, cybersecurity. Right? So those things, today it's a problem, but they'll continue to be a problem over the next 30, 40 years. As the IoT evolves, these things will continue to exist as a gap. Second is, as the devices, as IoT gets smarter and more intelligent, there are certain gaps that are holding back the smart IoT, data management, for example, AI, trust and explainability of the outcomes in AI, devices that are much more capable of running AI models and programs. So those are another area of research. And then the third area, what we call hyper-deployed, this is the future state, billions of devices. It's human-centric IoT. It's an IoT data ecosystem. It's an AI, I guess a future, very intelligent AI type, human AI collaborations. And so those are some of the key things. Oh, and then there's also a much more robust network that's capable of supporting and running all these devices. The self-healing, self-defending network, for example. Right, so those are another area of gaps that we found. So those are the three gaps. A third major finding was that we actually quantified the investments. Right? If you were to take a $10 million investment to address one gap, how would you allocate that funding across industries? Which industries? So it's not not any one area, right? But there's a certain allocation. So for example, to address interoperability, if you had $10 million, our economic models show that you would allocate 37% of that investment into healthcare, 14% into agriculture, 13% into manufacturing, and so forth. So we did that for all the gaps, and we did that for all 9 industries. So for the first time, it gives the federal government a little bit of a method, an algorithm, some logic to identify where they should be making their investments and why. Right?
You're talking about investments, and then you're talking about the federal government. So what is the role of the federal government when it comes to IoT development and addressing the gaps?
So I think this is very interesting. When we first started, we thought, oh, the government should only work on the things that industry isn't working on. And in fact, that's not the case. The case is industry is working on a lot of things that already, right? So it's not like there's some hidden things that government should do that industry isn't doing. Some of these gaps like interoperability, cybersecurity are so complex and been long running for the last 20, 30 years that it's impossible for any one entity to address it by themselves. So government needs to address cybersecurity. Industry is certainly addressing it, and so does universities and academia for research. Right? So everyone plays a unique role in that. So for example, new technology comes out, the federal government comes in and does the science before they set the standards, develop the frameworks, understand what needs to be standardized, then they provide that information over to industry. Industry gets together, collaborate, and they build the standards to build the products and commercialize things. And then as the technology evolves, then government again goes back in and addresses the pre-standards science. At the same time, government looks far ahead. They look 20, 30, 40 years into the future. And they start making investments in the areas that industry isn't necessarily thinking about today. Right? So that's the other role of government. And then finally, a third role of government is to address the things that, say for example, a particular company may not want to address because, hey, it's a conflict of our proprietary technologies. So the government would then invest in research to address those things that industry isn't necessarily doing, right? One or two companies isn't necessarily doing, but it provides an opportunity for other players to say, oh, these are the things that I need to go do.
So focusing its efforts on places where industry is not doing so, and that
right.
We've identified as areas in need of development.
Right, exactly.
Do you have specific recommendations for the government? I mean, the U.S. government?
Yes, so I think one of the big things was from this research we've identified a portfolio approach to investment. Right? So right now, all the agencies today, they do investments in their particular area that affects their industry, even though some of these things like interoperability may exist in other industries. Right? So a lot of these investments are made in a silo. So one of the things that we called out was that a portfolio approach to thinking about it from a whole government approach. Right? So the federal government is not one entity, it's made up of all these agencies, but they should coordinate with each other in a centralized way so that they can allocate the funding to where it makes the most sense, as well as to get the most benefit from the economy perspective. So that's kind of one set of recommendations. Second set of recommendations is the federal government should invest in the 11 gaps that we've identified over the 3 core areas. The third area is that they should continue to expand. We looked at 9 industries, but the government should expand into other strategic industries, aerospace and defense, for example, consumer packaged goods, mining. Mining, especially with rare minerals, is very strategic these days.
Wow.
So the government should start to look at.
Certainly hearing a lot about that these days.
Exactly. Right, so there are other strategic industries that the government should really, and where IoT can make a significant difference, and where the federal government should continue to look into and expand that research into that. The fourth area is AI has certainly become a big part, a huge part of IoT. They really need to study that, looking at economic research, similar to what was done for IoT, but to look at the impact of AI to IoT and what that means. So that's another recommendation for that. So those are, and to continue to refresh this research over a period of time as they monitor the progress of those investments. They want to see what economic outputs that they've created from this. So those are the recommendations that we have.
All in an effort to keep the U.S. IoT sector competitive and moving forward.
And keep keep the economy competitive, keep the nation resilient, but also to keep the society benefiting from all these investments, right? which is
Great
the
stuff.
big thing.
Great stuff. Once again, Keith Kreisher with the IoT M2M Council, IMC, joined by my good friend Benson Chan of Strategy of Things Group. Benson, thanks so much for being here. Have a great show.
Thanks for interviewing me.